Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. We're starting off the year with an amazing veteran retailer turned executive coach. Vicki Bradley is my special guest on the first episode of 2022. With a storied retail career in sales and operation roles from the Northern Group to the president of the Bombay Furniture Company, and then at HR2 by Holt Renfrew, plus a stint on the board of directors at RCC, Vicki now turns her talents to executive coaching. From senior C-level executives to junior managers, just starting out through her coaching practice and Women in Leadership Empowered online community, Vicki is sending the elevator back down to help retailers and leaders of the future discover their full potential.
Yeah, I think that the big thing is say yes, for sure. Say yes to things, be curious. Sometimes people get caught up on, well, it doesn't, pay enough money or it doesn't do this or that. Don't look at the short game. Look at what the long-term gain is. I had such an amazing career in retail, and I know so many others who have.
Let's listen in now. Vicki, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing this morning?
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to hear your voice. You and I have crossed paths a few times, and right back to when you're on the board of directors of Retail Council of Canada. Deanne Breezeboss says hello, by the way. So it all comes together, and I noticed the kind of work you were doing, and I thought, what a great guest for the podcast. So why don't we jump right in? Tell us and the listeners a bit about yourself and your retail background, and what is WIL Empowered?
Okay, awesome, Michael. Thank you. And love Deanne. Miss her terribly. A little bit about me. I spent almost 30 years in the retail world. Absolutely loved it, and it's very near and dear to my heart. Was the president of the Bombay Furniture Company for almost 10 years. Was at Marks & Spencer's Canada when they were still here. And my last role in retail was with Holt Renfrew. And all great experiences, have absolutely, just thrived and loved my retail career. And then I got sick, Michael, and I had to leave that world, which devastated me because I thrived in it and loved it. But anyway, that actually has brought me on this new journey that I'm on, where I have created WIL Empowered, which is Women in Leadership Empowered. And that's where I work with women on developing leadership skills, just to help them navigate, those careers and really building confidence and, helping them to be at their optimal and thrive, both in their personal and professional lives.
So let's take a step back a bit. Did you always want to get into retail? Some have described it as the accidental career. Is that a career that you went, whoops, I found myself in retail and it's a great place? Tell me about that a bit.
Well, that's so true, Michael. Yes, that's actually what happened to me. So when I was in university, I worked in the hospitality industry, loved it. And I actually was recruited into retail. And it was my last year in university. And I thought, wow, this sounds really interesting. Of course, as a woman, I loved fashion. And the company that recruited me was called Woolworth, but it was a division of Woolworth, which was Susie's Casuals in the U.S. And the woman who recruited me, she was like, it's not a lot of money. She said, but I think you'll love it. And I did. I fell in love. And so I went into their management training program. And back then, that was in, the early 80s, Woolworth was definitely way ahead of their time on their management training program and systems. They had great systems. And I learned a tremendous amount from them. But, it was really, for me, it was the fashion, and I caught that bug of competition and, always wanting to exceed my sales goals and beat everybody that was in our stores. And just had a fascinating career with them. They truly, taught me a lot and moved me around. So Susie's Casuals closed down and Northern Reflections opened up, which all of it was owned by Woolworth. And Northern Reflections is what took me, really into my executive roles. So I helped them open 400 stores across the U.S. And then they relocated me to Canada as the director of training and development, because we were growing so fast, Michael. We didn't have the bench strength that we required. And I tended to, they would parachute me into a market that was kind of in trouble, and I would clean it up, fix it, hire my replacement, and then they would move me to the next problem location. Sounds fun, right?
That's fun in principle.
And so that just turned me, like created this whole new adventure for me. And so they invited me to come to Canada and head up training and development for North America. So that I could train our district managers to run these 400 locations that we had just opened. And so I did, and it was really a career changer moving to Canada and, taking this on. And, my career just continued to, escalate and move into different parts of the business. But predominantly my focus was on sales operations and people. Like really, how do we develop people and bring the best out of them?
Right. And one thing, we jumped right in. Where am I reaching you today? Where are you based today?
Well, I'm just north of Toronto, up in Caledon. So I'm in Canada now for 26 years.
I was going to say, you came for the job and stayed for all the whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. I do love it here. Have great friends here, and this has become home.
Oh, very good. And Black Friday, Cyber Monday followed you up eventually. It took a while, right?
Yes, it did.
I mean, it's a funny thing. I talk to people, even reporters today, and they're like, I remind them that this is a fairly new phenomenon, like 10, 12 years, and then it wasn't always so. And, there is still debate amongst retailers about whether it was a good idea or not. I mean, it probably was inevitable, defensively and offensively, but it wasn't something that was a big part of your career, right? Because it's pretty recent, and maybe just at the end, that kind of started to creep into the Canadian market, right?
Yes, exactly. It wasn't until I was with Holt's that we experienced it, and and what an experience it was. I remember our location at Vaughan Mills. I was there at 6 a.m. on Black Friday, and I worked the lease line, and just, we had unbelievable lineups trying to get into the store for Black Friday. And I remember our CEO at the time was Mark Derbyshire, and Mark kept calling me saying, oh my gosh, have you seen what you guys are doing? I'm like, yeah, I'm in here. I'm living it. This is amazing.
All right. So since we're talking about that, and then I want to get on to talk about what you're doing now and lots of other questions, but Black Friday, Cyber Monday, good for Canadian retailers in Canada, or wish it would have stayed a U.S. idea?
Well, I'm a retailer at heart. And so I think you said this earlier, I think it was inevitable that it would happen. And, Canadians are in the U.S. so often, and there's so much border shopping. And so it's, why not keep it in Canada, right? Because, I know myself, even at being a retailer, my friends and I would pack up the car and head down to, Buffalo the end of November and do our Christmas shopping. And so I think it's important that we keep it in Canada as much as we can. And, there's so many brands that have moved into Canada from the U.S. I know we've lost a few, during COVID, but there's so many brands that are here now that it just makes sense to me that we do it.
All right. Well, let's talk about you. Tell me about what you do today, and what what gap you're filling in the market or the business world, and what were you looking to accomplish with WIL Empowered?
Okay. Happy to. So I do a couple of things, Michael. So I'm an executive coach, and I work with a lot of, senior women in helping them navigate their careers, whether they're transitioning, whether they're getting promoted, moving from mid-level to senior level management roles. And I also have WIL Empowered. Again, that's Women in Leadership Empowered. And part of why I created that was based on my own journey through retail, to be honest. There weren't a lot of women, and there weren't a lot of role models. However, I will, give Deanna a plug, because she was always certainly a great role model for me, and someone that I knew I could go to, because as an old boss said to me from Marks and Spencer's, Dave Stewart said to me one time, he goes, Vicki, be careful, because it's lonely at the top. And you got to be careful what you wish for. And I always kept that in the back of my mind. And so part of why I've created what I have is to just really help women create that support network and the tribe, if you want to call it that, so that they have a place, a safe space that they can go and talk to other women about the challenges they face. Because let's face it, men and women, we do face different challenges in the working world. And, women are still taking on a lot of the responsibilities at home, and we're also thriving in our careers and, climbing those corporate ladders. Yeah. And so part of this was to really help them have a support system to flush ideas, to really help them also build the confidence that they need to go after those roles that they so deserve. I'll give you an example. I had a client one time who was VP of marketing of a major Canadian company, and she was given an opportunity to take on a new role. And when they came to her, they said to her, we really want you to take on this additional role. And her first response was, well, I'm not qualified. And so she didn't take the role. And so when we spoke about it, I said to her, I go, why would you say that? Like, you've headed up the head of IT, you've headed up the, marketing. Like, if anybody's the right person for this role, it's you. And I said, what do you think, John down the hallway here would say if they came to him? And she goes, you're right. She goes, I missed an opportunity where I could have, really taken my career to that next level.
Do you find that that's consistently or still the case between men and women when they're offered promotions? That,
yes.
I think women are more thoughtful about it. Says, yeah, I've never done quite that thing. Whereas the guys are like, yeah, I'll, behind, as soon as the door closed, they're like, I have no idea how to do that job. I guess
exactly.
I guess I'll just make it up as I go along. I'll just figure it out. Do you find that as a still I don't know if I call it a defining characteristic, but a common thread in your discussions with women leaders? It is.
Unfortunately, it is. And I think some of that comes into play where women they're also balancing what's happening at home. They're balancing what's happening in their careers. And so they're more hesitant to put themselves forward because of all of those factors. Mm-hmm. And you're right. Men are very quick to jump on it and figure it out later. And so, a lot of the coaching I do is around building that confidence to go for it, because there's always a way to figure out how to balance it all behind the scenes. The important thing is to know that you have that ability to actually do the job that you're hoping to attain. And so it continues to this day to be a challenge, and women don't even realize it.
Do you come across imposter syndrome as it's known? Is that a subset of these concerns, or is that another defining characteristic amongst leaders in general? Is that something you talk about with your what do you call them, mentees or your clients, I guess?
Just clients. Yeah. They're my clients. Yes, the imposter complex comes up. Boundaries probably comes up a lot. But imposter complex, just feeling that they're not qualified for particular roles that may come across their desk or opportunities that they're presented with. And so part of that is knowing themselves, right? And knowing that it's reminding ourselves, because women, we don't tend to have that same, we don't keep record of all the accomplishments the way we need to show that, hey, you know what? Yeah, I've done this before. I can do this. And that's a big part of, how I coach my clients, is getting them to recognize what they have done and how that translates into this next opportunity, but also how they see things, how they look at things more holistically before jumping right in.
What speaking more generally, what are the key traits of retail leadership that you found? I mean, there's many, many paths to leadership. Some go through the stores, some go through merchandising, stores, operations, merchandising. A few go through marketing. What are the kind of those key characteristics you look for that you had yourself that make a great leader generally in the retail industry?
Well, I think part of it is, not being afraid to hear no. Because no doesn't mean no. It means not yet. Yeah. Right. So really that determination. But I think, part of what is helpful is having the ability to identify great teams and to know that it's not just about you. right? Like, I mean, my team at Bombay was a big part of, I mean, they were the driving force of why we were so successful, right? So being able to identify the talent and that takes a lot of courage from leaders, because you got to put your ego aside and look at what others are contributing, and that, you know, it takes all of you to make it successful. So I think that's, you know, one area. Another one is really becoming, especially in retail, becoming more of a generalist. So understanding all aspects of retail, because retail is one of the most fascinating businesses out there in my mind, Michael, because you've got supply chain, you've got marketing, you've got finance, you've got sales, you've got product development, like you cover people development, all of these areas that, you know, if all of those things aren't fine-tuned, you're not going to be successful. Mm-hmm. And the beautiful thing is that you can move around, right? And I really, you know, when I started my career, my focus was really sales and operations. And then when I moved into Marks and Spencer's, that was really when things impacted me, because, you know, our CEO pushed me to take on store design. He pushed me to take on human resources, you know, to participate in line reviews and, you know, helping to pick color palettes and all these things that, you know, where do you get the opportunity to be so integrated into a business? So I think you also as a leader, you got to be curious, right? You got to look at all the areas and be curious about what other people are doing within your organization.
Boy, that last part about being curious. I mean, how many retail leaders and how many times have we seen lately this discussions about supply chain, right? Supply chain used to be something I wouldn't by any stretch of imagination say taken for granted, but generally, you know, the people who run supply chain are very good at it, and they move the goods, and you really only, you know, I would say sometimes you'd paid attention only when it didn't arrive, right?
Yeah,
it's like what happened. Now it's like the focal point. I talked to merchants today, and they said, well, half my day is spent making sure my goods are going to arrive, which was it's very different. And boy, you need a appreciation for all the moving parts of the retail spectrum. Yeah,
you do. You have to, and you got to have great people leading each of those parts. That are also great communicators that talk to other parts. So the example you just gave, like when the merchant team and the supply chain team aren't talking, you got a problem. Right?
Yeah, that's a big problem.
And marketing too, because marketing is also trying to promote the goods that are coming in. So it's all so intertwined. And so communication between each of those parties, like you can have differences, that's great. But at the end of the day, you got to come out all together.
It's, you know, as Deanne reminds me of a great quote from Deanne. She likes to say, Deanne Breezewell from Retail Council of Canada, she likes to say, retail isn't brain surgery, it's more complex.
No kidding.
Speaking specifically to women in leadership, what would your advice be? You mentioned you went through a trainee program from the kind of store ops up. What, you know, focusing less on senior leadership and more about younger women who are preparing for that track. What's your advice to them about the best way? I mean, I think you're already touching on it, you know, explore, you know, take opportunities when presented, explore all kinds of different things, you know, don't go down a single lane, because that makes it a little harder to be a generalist as you go up the ladder. Is any other tips that you could share?
Yeah, I think that the big thing is say yes, for sure. Say yes to things, be curious. You know, sometimes people get caught up on, well, it doesn't, you know, pay enough money, or it doesn't do this or that. You know, don't look at the short game. Look at what the long-term gain is. Like, I mean, I had such an amazing career in retail, and I know so many others who have. You know, one of my clients today, she worked for one of our major retailers, and she's a senior partner at Deloitte. Right. Mm-hmm. And so she started her career in retail, and she's still working in retail, but through the consulting arm. Right. So there's so many opportunities if you can move past, you know, I work in a store today, to see what the longer term gain can be. And working in a store, by the way, is amazing, because you learn so much about people, the customers that are coming in, the people that you work with. So I think that, you know, I'll go back to curiosity. I think that that's important when you're learning as a young woman in particular, and really pushing yourself to take opportunities that you might not otherwise have. Right. So going for it. But also it's what are you doing outside of retail to learn and to grow, right? So even if I take retail as an example, are you competition shopping? Are you seeing what your competitors are doing and what is making them stand out? What's making them shrink back? Because those lessons also help you learn to be much more introspective, even for yourself.
I think back to when you started your career versus now, there's so many more resources that are different. I mean, the things you're describing are kind of like almost table stakes, right, for a good retail leader. But now you've got all kinds of different ways to learn, from the internet to podcast to all these things to YouTube. You've got a lot of different ways to learn, right? It's really, absolutely. Sometimes I think it's a balance of just finding some of the right things and right advice. So would you advise mentorship, coaching? Like at what point do you think it's the right idea to get a coach of some sort, way, shape, or another, invest in that relationship?
Well, that's a great question. And I was just on with a client actually who is starting out in their career and they've hired me to work with them. I think the younger you do that, the better, because it helps you actually bring a lot of the things that are invisible. It helps you to make those things visible. And you start to be more mindful about how you navigate that journey of your career. And let's face it, our careers are a huge part of who we are, right? Yeah. And so you want to have a focus and a plan as to how you want to navigate that. But I also think, mentorship, just to your point, like mentorship is huge, and you need to have a variety of mentors, people who give you different perspective, right? And challenge you on some of your thinking, because we get caught up in what we think we know and we know is best. Yeah. And when you start hearing what other people are, how their perceptions are, what they're seeing, you learn a lot through that.
And it's fair to say there's a lot of paths to leadership in an industry as big and broad as retail, but absolutely, there's still a strategy, right? Up the center of that, there is and you've been sharing it, so it's been a great interview. You've been sharing those core strategies that don't change, but that's a great reminder. All right, I cannot have you on the mic, such a retail veteran, whether talking about retail in the COVID era, not about a history lesson, but what do you think after all this? And boy, I think we can see the end zone. The goalposts keep moving. We're recording this in late November. We've just learned about this new variant, and by the time folks are listening to this, it may or may not be hugely impactful. But it's clear we're not through it yet. However, we feel like we're coming out on the other side. Certainly after 2 years of living through this, consumers have changed in some way, shape, or form. We're all trying to figure that out. Any thoughts from your perspective as you kind of observe and watch, and through your clients, kind of hear what they're going through? Any thoughts of what a post-consumer retail environment looks like?
Yeah, it's funny, Michael. I think that, it still holds true. Service. And service comes in different ways, but, being in tune to who your clients are, some of the smaller boutiques who have survived through what we've already, endured through COVID, is because they've gotten innovative and they're talking to their clients. They're reaching out. They're finding creative ways to help them shop, to be honest. The ones who have not survived, I think in a lot of cases, is they've lost sight of that. Because there's many ways that, even if I use history as a lesson, when I started in my own retail career, I had my own clientele list and I would call them whenever we would get a shipment. Yeah. And so we could have never even opened the doors and I still could have sold. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think there's some of that. I think part of it too is that, people have to, support local as much as possible, and be out there, not being so fearful. Yes, we have to take precautions. We have to be careful, but finding innovative ways to shop as well. Like I'll pick up the phone and I'll call and say, can we do a private shopping? Yeah. Right. And some of that is stuff that we used to do way back in the early days.
A lot of questions around what retail innovations happened during the COVID era. I don't think a lot of retail innovations actually happened. I think some things were just brought back. Some things were adopted. There's a few, but, I try to say, there's if you're getting back to the customer, there's good lessons to learn from recent retail practice, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will always be that person who says service. Like, I think when you make the customer
that's
feel
your pedigree,
great,
right? That's your background. I mean, that's where you came up from. So
exactly. And I still to this day truly embody and believe in that, because if you don't, somebody else will take care of them. And so, it's getting out of our own heads and finding creative ways to communicate and talk to those customers and keep them close.
Right. Great advice. Well, listen, speaking of advice, this has been great conversation. It's been great to hear your voice and chit and chat about this stuff. How can folks go to learn more about your services and get in touch?
Oh, awesome. Thank you. And yes, this has been wonderful, Michael. Thank you. So you can find me online at www.atwillempowered. So it's WIL Empowered, EMPOWERED. And you can also reach me at Vicki at Will Empowered if you have questions and you want to have a chat about, just having a discovery call is very valuable in figuring out how you transition or how you move to that next level in leadership. But would be happy to have conversation. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And
as I think you've mentioned a couple of times, your scope, so to speak, is from young executives who are looking to move through their career, and for very senior leaders today, right? So you've got a broad scope between those people. Well, listen, Vicki, it's been great catching up. It's great chit and chatting about leadership and what catching up and what you're doing. Thanks so much for joining me on the Voice of Retail. It's a great conversation, and I wish you continued success and a great 2022. Thank you, Michael, and same to you. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Voice of Retail. Be sure and follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts so you don't miss out on the latest episodes, industry news, and insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating review, as it really helps us grow so that we continue to get amazing guests onto the show. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of Emmy LeBlanc Company, Inc., and if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at emmyleblanc.co. Until next time, stay safe, have a great week.